Good morning. How many people know the difference between being self-absorbed, being self-centered, and being selfish? How many people truly believe that being selfish is not just a good thing, it's a necessity? And how many people agree that when we show up with selfishness, people in our social circles generally respect and appreciate us more, your sense of worth increases, your confidence increases, and your joy? This last one might be difficult to swallow at first, and it is still true. Welcome to Mental Fortress Mondays. I am Dr. Cheryl Carthouse, naturopathic doctor. Our mission here is to explore the who, what, where, when, why, and how of mindfulness and mindfulness-based practices, and how they impact our physiology, our ability to think, our performance at work or our hobbies, and our overall quality of life. I started this series to provide support and development of mental resilience during this recent pandemic. There's still a lot of transition happening. Things might be changing in the next week or so, and many people have new rules to adjust to. Maybe work's changed, or maybe still recovering from an immense amount of stress or different things that we went through with different roles as they were placed on us through the recent pandemic. So my mission here is to provide that guidance on how we can build our mental resilience, your emotional intelligence, to become better at navigating stress that we encounter every day, and then to recover more quickly and easily from chronic stress that we, for the most part, all experience, and to be more resilient to stress that we might encounter tomorrow, and ultimately live happier, more fulfilling, and joyful lives. Last week, we talked about using body sensations as gauges to help us make decisions. We discussed how journaling, verbalizing, and physically trying on a choice can help to develop a sense of knowing. Our gauges also provide us new and different information that can make us more confident in our decisions. So check that out if you'd like to. It's week 16. Today we're going to talk about what it means to be selfish and how we can do this to better our lives. There's so much to cover here. It's going to take us 2 weeks. So this is the first part. And then over the weeks thereafter, I'll cover a number of different topics inspired by my patients and questions that I'm getting from you on specific topics, such as food choices. There's a lot of comments lately about trying to make these really good food choices and struggling to keep that consistency. So we're going to go into how we can make that easier for ourselves and a couple different tools, and then some of the similar sort of idea with physical activity and even with aligning with your goals of what you truly want. So much to look forward to. If you guys have anything that you want to cover in terms of topics, please feel free to reach out, leave me a message on any of these social platforms. I'd love to share your inspiration with others and we can all learn together. Self-absorbed, self-centered, or selfish. Being self-absorbed or self-centered are not inspired. It's focused on making you feel good in the moment, perhaps, or from somebody else's interpretation, and not what is necessarily good or healthy for you. When we're self-centered, we get these sort of unhealthy cravings, things to do that release endorphins that help us to feel better in the moment, but leave us feeling unfulfilled, feeling empty, off balance, and craving more or something else. When someone else calls us selfish for doing something that we want to do that they don't necessarily want us to do, I suggest that this is actually more of us being self-absorbed, or other people noting that we're being self-absorbed. And it doesn't necessarily take into account the intention that we have. It's really someone else's perspectives. And being selfish, on the other hand, are behaviors and choices that hold your boundaries, your own limitations, and keep you grounded. They may or may not make others happy at the same time, but they do fulfill you. We all tend to have behaviors that fall into all three of these categories, and I'm going to sort of challenge you, of course, to try and make more selections to be selfish over the next coming weeks. Whether something is an act of being self-absorbed, as others are observing, being self-centered, or selfish, it is really all about that intention and perspective that I mentioned. You can help a friend or colleague and it can come from a place of need for you, a place of being self-centered, where we're doing it maybe out of obligation or because we want to maintain a status quo of a relationship, that someone else might expect something from us and we don't want it to fail that expectation, but maybe it pushes our boundaries. Maybe we don't have the energy today, but we do it anyway. Many acts of self-centeredness are acts of self-sacrificing. Or you can help a friend or colleague and do it from a place of selfishness, where it's helping to build a relationship perhaps, or you're enjoying to spend time with them. You're helping that friend and colleague where it's lifting them up, and helping them also helps you to feel good without sacrificing your own limitations and your own boundaries. It can be inspiring, and it can leave you feeling good about yourself because you participated in helping someone else feel good. The underlying limiting beliefs that accompany being self-absorbed or self-centered are often fear. Fear that we might again disturb that status quo of a relationship, fear of being rejected and losing our belonging among family, friends, and colleagues. Or perhaps there's a self-driven fear of not feeling good enough if we don't do enough. Subconsciously, doing more for others often palliates this feeling of not feeling good enough in ourselves, regardless of what topic it is that we're actually participating in. It makes us feel good for a moment. It sort of palliates that before these destructive limiting beliefs come back in. And this is what we're trying to transform. We want to transform that the idea of when we can be selfish actually helps to balance us, it helps to ground us, and helps us to feel whole. And that keeping our own boundaries and limitations can actually be empowering. Imagine someone you love more than anything in the world. Imagine that they were really lifted up, inspired, and created absolutely every day with this immense joy and love that just radiates out of them, so that every word that they have or every act that they did, it touched others in a very positive way. And now imagine that that person is you. We often don't think of ourselves in that same way, that we really appreciate and want all of these beautiful things. We sort of subliminally do, or we think that we do, maybe more consciously actually, want these things for ourselves, but we don't actually take the actions to do it for ourselves, or at least very, very few people do. I want to bring us all to a place where we function from a foundation of believing that we are worthy, we are loved, we are capable, we truly want the best that love and life have to offer, because it ultimately makes us happier. It improves our quality of life, it decreases the stress and burnout we experience, it actually avoids it in a lot of cases, and life goals are achieved much more easily. And the whole time, it can be fun. To achieve this, it is simple, but very, very hard to do, and hard to do consistently. When we engage in all of those selfish practices that really help to ground us, to put on our mask first before we help other people, it puts us in a space where we have much more resilience, much more to give, and that can continue over longer periods of time. When we don't do that, we're not selfish enough to take those moments to ground ourselves before engaging in tasks or holding our boundaries and maybe not engaging in tasks with someone else, then that's when we really start to feel our energy deplete quickly. One large roadblock in our way is that the idea of being selfish as a good thing goes against the grain of what society teaches us. We learn that the idea of selfishness being self-absorbed equates to being self-absorbed, and automatically means that other people suffer or someone else might not like it. And this is really not the case. We need to let go of some of these misconceptions. Another idea is that we're taught that we must be self-sacrificing in order to be good enough. Something needs to be hard. How many people get the sense that we are only contributing enough, or you're only doing enough once you're exhausted and stressed by the end of the day? Our society seems to thrive on this idea. I know that this was my first sense of what work was, that it needed to be hard, it needed to be a struggle, and that if it was uncomfortable to a certain degree, or if I wasn't stressed enough, I wasn't quite doing enough. Our society equates the level of stress with a level of productivity. And I dare to say even that you're worthy if you're at this particular level of stress. We really, really need to retrain these thoughts and let go of these ideas and step into the beliefs that being happy and fulfilled and relaxed are valued. And that simply being us and stepping into the world as you are valued and feeling joy is valued. And really embrace these healthy concepts of selfishness. People-pleasing is another idea that comes up when discussing selfishness. People-pleasing can also be a good thing when it's done in a healthy, selfish way. It is pleasing to us to uplift others. When I do something that helps someone else, I often feel inspired. I get excited too. Now, the downside of this people-pleasing is when we do it for other people and it's not an act of selfishness, but more self-sacrificing. In this context, something happens in this whole process that really pulls us off from being grounded, from doing it for the love of it. We don't have that inspiration in it anymore, and often our boundaries are violated. When we focus on what other people's actual need is, and we get caught up in that need, rather than kind of coming from a place of really feeling loved and providing, just coming from a place of, I'm doing this because I love you, not because there is this dragging need and you're getting caught up in whatever that, I'll say, drama is, for lack of a better understanding, but I think then you understand what I mean. It's trying to fill a need or fulfill something for someone else. And we can be there for them, we can support that in them, but it violates some of those boundaries to try and fill a need that someone else needs to fill for themselves. And joy and happiness is part of that. When we feel ungrounded and stressed, we then often start, typically, to blame others for how we feel. We might feel more irritable and then foster resentment within that relationship. Whether we tell them or not, or whether it's just this little inkling of a feeling of, oh, I really didn't want to do it, but you did it anyway, that sort of lingers, and that resentment or frustration or irritability, it has an insult to our boundaries and to ourselves and to our sense of being. It increases stress significantly for us, and in turn, our relationships do suffer whether we acknowledge it as a big thing or not. We're simply more miserable in those states. When we don't put our own groundedness as a top priority, that energy and that effort that we put into pleasing someone else is finite and it runs out really quickly. Let's explore a positive example of this. What is the idea of play? Researchers Stuart Brown, MD, and Brene Brown helped form this definition, mostly Brene Brown's definition. Play is time spent without purpose, full of enjoyment, creativity and innovation, and it is where we lose track of time. When was the last time you played? Sit down with your closest people, maybe it's some friends or your immediate family, and everyone come up with a list of what play is to them. It might be surprising how few of these activities overlap, or maybe lots of them will. The point is that when it is truly play for you, it is easy to lose track of time, it is fulfilling, inspiring, and I would argue that play leaves us feeling whole and grounded with this sense of love. It is a selfish act to play. If it is not, it doesn't fulfill the above. It might be entertaining or occupying, but it is not play. And often we do things, especially with children, out of a sense of duty, but it's not always play for us, even when it is play for them. In one of Brene Brown's lectures, she has this example with her and her family of playing a game of life, and that it was super fun for the kids, and they wanted to play for hours and hours and hours, and to her, it was a sense of duty, a sense of participation. I'm doing this because I'm your mother, and I love you, and I want you to experience that sense of joy and play because that's what they got out of it. And when they really made that list and found those things that really everyone knew or felt like play was to them, it was actually their vacations, I think. And so they started planning more vacations, because in contrast to feeling like it's slightly draining, there's only so many hours of the game of life that you can play, it was something that really inspired them. For me, it might be being outside, maybe rock climbing. I love rock climbing. Or sitting by a campfire and sharing stories. I feel inspired. I just feel free and like I forget about the rest of the world for those moments. I might get new creative ideas about problem solving just within that activity, or maybe feel more grounded and inspired afterwards that I get to be more creative in my work or hobbies or whatever it is that I'm doing. I feel fulfilled and grounded and just have this physical exhaustion that is satisfying. I sleep like a baby and I feel more like me, more in my own skin. What's the difference of these activities being selfish or seen as being self-absorbed and self-sacrificing is how you view it and how other people view it. If my friend that I go with also loves rock climbing, they just play for both of us. Everyone is grounded, fulfilled, and inspired. If it's something that they're doing for me and I continually day after day want to go climbing, they may interpret that as me being selfish, or as we've used in this definition here in this lecture, self-absorbed, because it makes me happy, but it doesn't make them happy. Do we see how someone else's perspective and their interpretation of that activity is really the determining factor as to if you are being viewed as self-absorbed? And then how you feel about the situation, if you feel joy about it, or if you feel like it pushes your boundaries, are the difference between it being self-sacrificing and self-centered, where you're doing it almost out of this fear of palliating a fear, rather than it being a selfish act that's going to be fulfilling for you. Now, there is, of course, a reality that we do not always agree with others on what we want to do, and that we might need to engage in some of these types of different tasks. There are compromises in relationships, for sure. And of course, we'll do things in our lives for others, for work, for family or friends, whoever it is, that are not necessarily fulfilling for us, but really does help to build our relationship. The perspective of your own view is really key to determining this. And I have sort of a framework like the window of tolerance, sort of this window of selfishness. And we don't have time to go in it today, but that's what we're going to cover next week. I'm pretty excited about this. So to summarize here, our definitions that we develop today here are: to be self-absorbed is what someone else might call you if you are doing something that they don't want you to do or that doesn't fulfill them. Being self-centered is when we engage in our own, I'd argue, almost self-destructive behaviors that are self-sacrificing, that drain us, that leave us wanting this next fix, that come from a place of fear or these limiting beliefs that really don't hold up our base foundation of integrity, of providing worthiness to ourselves. And being selfish is when we are engaged in behaviors that fulfill us, the intention of these acts and the words that come from a place of love rather than a place of need, and they leave us grounded. So how do we practice being selfish? Of course, mindfulness and some of our mindfulness-based practices. Checking in with our body sensations when you make the choice. Decision-making lecture would be really helpful to go over if you didn't get a chance to watch that as well. It helps us make a choice from a state of awareness so that we can assess if it's going to really violate our boundaries, and that we're not so quick to just say yes. There's been a couple of practices with certain people in my life that I've tried to deliberately say, I'll think about it, instead of just automatically responding as we might do. So try at least that technique this week too. Just say, I'll think about it for a minute, or for a day, or however long you need, and then come back and give them an answer so that you're not just automatically agreeing and saying yes to everything, which I feel a lot of people have told me is part of the problem with them, and part of the problem with their responses. So let's engage in a mindfulness practice here. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes if you'd like to, and just check in with your body, starting at the top of your head. Maybe taking a deep breath and just noticing how your lungs fill and empty. Just doing a quick body part scan where you check in with your head, see any sensations that are there. And then your chest. And your back. Your right arm. Down to your fingertips and your left arm. And then your abdomen. And your lower back. Your pelvis. And your right leg, your hip, all the way down to your toes. And your left hip, all the way down to your toes. And if that's too fast or slow, just take your time to explore the different sensations of your body. Often some parts are much easier to feel than others. There's no wrong way to do this. And try to think of an activity that really inspires you. Something that you would do that would leave you feeling grounded and whole. And notice how any of the sensations in your body start to change. And notice what other thoughts might come up. Maybe they're more practical things. Yeah, but I don't have time for that. Or, yeah, but other people need me and I'm going to have to do this instead of that. Or I'm going to have to feed the kids instead of this. Or I have work to do or things to study or whatever it is, instead of doing these inspiring, selfish things. Those are really important things to notice because those are going to be your obstacles that stand in your way. And engaging in them and understanding the emotions and any beliefs that underlie them, can help to understand how that could possibly change if it were going to. Could you imagine a scenario where the world doesn't stop turning because you're not there for that time? The house doesn't burn down, whatever it is, doesn't get done, but that might be okay for today. And just check in with yourself if that feels okay or if it absolutely doesn't. You might not be ready for that change yet. But acknowledging those inspiration play activities for us, things that we want to do, and acknowledging the resistance that we have. Maybe you think it'll impact someone else just a little too much, or in a way that they might not be ready for, or that you think that they're not ready for. Be careful that we don't engage or allow our assumptions to take over. Because people are often a lot more open to something than we think that they are. And if you can, just for a moment, imagine yourself maybe being a little bit more vulnerable in that space and explaining to the people it might impact how important this might be for you. How much might it decrease your stress and make it you more available for them, or you more available to do that studying or the work or whatever it is that you're going to be able to come back to once you feel grounded and inspired again. And just checking in with your body sensations the whole time. What sits well with you and what doesn't? then just to do another body scan, starting this time at your feet. Maybe your left toes, bringing your attention and your awareness up to your hip. And your right leg, starting at your toes all the way up to your hip. And your pelvis, just noting any of the sensations. Maybe it's your buttocks on the ground, on a cushion, or on a chair. Or maybe it's your feet on the ground if you're standing. And then up through your abdomen to your chest. And your lower back. And upper back. And starting at your right fingertips all the way up to your shoulder. And your left fingertips all the way up to your shoulder. Up your neck. And around your face. And head all the way to the top of your head. And just take a couple deep breaths here and breathe out slowly for kind of 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and wiggle your fingers and toes. Try to engage today in one selfish activity. If it's a change from being self-centered into being selfish, even better. Approach it with that honest vulnerability to hold a boundary for yourself and make a choice that will really set you up for better success today and then in the future. And perhaps it's even that one change of saying, just give me a minute, I'll think about it, rather than giving a yes or no answer right away. Thanks for joining this morning. I will see you next week for building more selfishness. Take care.